No matter who plots against you, no matter what trap they prepare, the invisible shield around you repels every attack. Even if you are not aware of it, there is such a strong protection around you that every negative energy, every gossip, every attempt to defame you disappears before it can touch you. While they are waiting for you to fall, every move they make gets tangled in their own feet. You are not an ordinary person. You have a divine touch, a special power for the chosen ones. All the difficulties you have experienced so far have been staged to show how great the protection within you is. Now it is time to ascend. No longer will your fears be your guide, but your inner light. No matter what anyone does, no one can block your path. Immediately write 555 in the comment, because the shield around you exists to protect you from every evil, and this protection will baffle anyone who wants to stop you. There are seasons when those who once poured poison into the well of your life suddenly find their own cup filling with the very bitterness they intended for you. All the subtle manipulations and hidden snares crafted in the shadows start circling back, touching the hand that cast them. The tools of sabotage, those whispered intentions, silent curses, invisible pressures, begin returning to the architect, affecting what they secretly hold most dear. What was meant to dismantle your sense of safety or undermine your confidence now erodes their own sanctuary, turning their fortress into a house of cards trembling in the faintest wind. The realization dawns. The harm intended for another often finds its way home, settling on the doorstep of the heart they most wanted to protect. In families, envy and rivalry can hide behind masks of civility, but under the surface, a quiet storm brews. The tales of ancient betrayals may belong to another era, but echoes of similar wounds resurface when gifts are misunderstood or dreams inspire suspicion instead of celebration. Destinies are quietly contested, not always by open confrontation, but in side comments, in the doubting glances, in the way hopes are dismissed as delusions. Sometimes, the path forward feels deliberately barricaded, with discouragement or suspicion taking the place of encouragement, and with those closest acting as keepers of invisible chains, making escape from smallness feel impossible. Visions can become burdens when the world is not ready to understand them. Hopeful glimpses of the future can stir a restlessness in those who fear change, leading to a subtle campaign of resistance and dismissal. The flicker of a calling draws not applause, but unease, and the shining of an inner light can provoke shadows to gather. Instead of seeing the value in what has been entrusted to a life, some work hard to dim it, to reshape the narrative so that purpose becomes a problem and favor is labeled as threat. The cost of such rejection is sharpest when it's delivered by hands expected to offer comfort. There are seasons when survival means resisting currents designed to drag one under. The isolation grows sharper, not because of solitude, but because of the refusal of those around to acknowledge what is being endured. Threats to well-being might come not as overt confrontations, but in a series of improbable incidents, in the orchestrated coincidence of harm, or in the sudden onset of troubles that logic cannot trace to their source. Allies become rare, as former friends withdraw, believing what is easier than seeking what is true. Expert opinions offer no shelter, unable or unwilling to see beneath the surface, and so the struggle becomes a solitary one, facing what others cannot or will not perceive. Dive deeper into parables and prophecy. Subscribe for revelations. Moments arise when the ordinary masks of loved ones slip, revealing forces or influences that seem to sweep in from beyond ordinary explanation. Sudden changes in behavior, unexplained events, or physical evidence that defies common logic accumulate, forming a tapestry of experience that cannot easily be described or justified to others. Sharing these stories with the uninitiated often brings dismissal or ridicule, as the world prefers simple explanations and predictable outcomes. Yet, reality proves stranger, and those bearing the brunt of this unseen storm are left searching for meaning in places others never look. There is a kind of placement that feels accidental but proves essential, a soul set among those whose ways are not their own, called not to conform but to transform. The challenge is not simply to endure discomfort but to awaken to a mission that transcends its environment. The comforts of belonging are often replaced by an unshakable sense of otherness, a knowing that the foundations beneath are not meant to last. When truth is discovered and the true shape of identity is revealed, crisis follows, for the fabric of the familiar cannot stretch to fit what no longer wishes to remain hidden. It is in this crucible, far from easy acceptance, amid misunderstanding and misrepresentation, that the seeds of freedom take root. Preparation comes not through ease, but through wandering, through being set apart, through enduring what feels like endless delay. Obstacles are not simply placed by accident, but as a means of strengthening resolve. The habits of control and patterns of limitation that persist around the path are signs of deeper forces at work, striving to keep the present order undisturbed, unaware that the very resistance they offer is what shapes a leader capable of something far greater. Sometimes, when the truth beneath the surface is disturbed, the response is as swift as a startled flock scattering at dawn. A person who dares to question the unwritten rules, to shine a lamp into the corners where secrets sleep, finds themselves abruptly outside the circle. The terrain shifts, the familiar becomes strange, and the expected path twists into unfamiliar wilderness. That season of wandering, spent away from familiar comforts and cut off from the warmth of belonging, carves new depth into the soul. In that lonely landscape, every delay, every unanswered cry, every locked door is not just punishment but preparation. Resistance strengthens what will not yield. Absence grows the roots of persistence deeper than comfort ever could. Those who would rather keep the pattern unbroken often mistake their own rigidity for wisdom, mistaking stubbornness for strength. The need to preserve their version of order blinds them to every sign, every hint of change, so the barriers never fall by chance. What looks like a system of stability is, in truth, built on the fear that freedom, anyone's freedom, will reveal the cracks they refuse to see. Within such webs, unseen agreements linger, giving those who benefit from the arrangement a reason to keep things as they are. The interests of the few can weigh against the growth of the one, and so subtle forces rise to keep progress at bay. Unspoken alliances and quiet exchanges of favor maintain the status quo, while anyone who disrupts the pattern becomes the object of blame. Old cycles are defended with new justifications, and those who question are cast as threats. Liberation is rarely received as a blessing by those whose comfort depends on the chains of others. When one thread is pulled loose, the whole tapestry trembles. Old privileges and protections, earned or inherited, become shields for some and burdens for others. Even those who appear most powerful fear what change might reveal. So the dynamic persists, shifting blame onto the one who stands apart. The community, anxious to preserve its sense of order, projects its discomfort, making the outsider the scapegoat for every storm. Falsehood, once released, spreads quietly, winding through conversations, glances, and silences until it takes root. Over time, a whole forest of misconception can grow from a single seed of doubt, watered by repetition and shaded by unwillingness to confront the truth. When someone tries to step outside the image that's been painted for them, the resistance is not merely individual, it is collective, rehearsed over years and embedded in every casual interaction. Incidents are recast, motives are rewritten, and the narrative is carefully tended to ensure that no alternative version can take hold. The deeper purpose is not only to silence dissent, but to anchor the community's identity in opposition to the challenger. The roles of disruptor and victim are assigned before the trial even begins. In this cycle, inherited patterns loop across generations. Behaviors taught by example rather than word, wounds carried from mother to child or father to son, ripple through the fabric of relationship. Abandonment, betrayal, secrecy, and control hide in different disguises but repeat their lessons year after year. The child who questions becomes the adult who is shunned. The one who sets a boundary becomes the target for anger left over from old battles. Dysfunction camouflages itself as tradition, and the price for refusing to continue the dance is exile. Attempts to introduce honesty, healing, or growth are met with suspicion or outright hostility. Any act of health, declining to gossip, stepping away from emotional manipulation, or refusing to play the assigned role, becomes the proof of being the real problem. To expose the wound is to become the wound in the eyes of those determined to protect their illusions. Each act of courage is twisted, each choice for light is recast as a threat, and every honest reflection is punished with rejection. The cost of breaking free is to walk through the fire alone, carrying not only hope for yourself, but the weight of all the stories that came before. Looking for inspiration and intrigue? Subscribe and start your quest. Some truths exist beneath the surface like roots in winter, hidden from sight but quietly shaping everything above. Within certain circles, there is a collective agreement to ignore the things that unsettle, to rewrite events so that discomfort is buried beneath routine. Whispers about unseen forces are replaced by laughter at anyone who names them. There are those who, deep down, know the undercurrents are real but bury that awareness beneath habit and fear, inventing reasons to discredit any voice that challenges the official story. A few have caught glimpses of the unexplained, unsettling moments, odd happenings, or private warnings that contradict the rules of ordinary life, but rather than disrupt the fragile peace, they lock away those memories. Even when misfortune follows patterns too strange to be random, silence is easier than confrontation. Sometimes, people even participate in rituals that seem meaningless, telling themselves it's just tradition, refusing to wonder why so many threads seem to tie back to the same knot. Within every close-knit group, an unspoken hierarchy rises up like sediment in a glass left to settle. Among them, there is often one who seems immune to the fallout of their own choices, always shielded, always excused, no matter what storms they stir. While another is quietly blamed, this figure is celebrated, even as their actions ripple outward and create mess after mess. The loyalty they command is baffling. No mistake is ever allowed to stick, no misstep ever leads to real consequence, and every need is treated as urgent by all those around them. Meanwhile, those who challenge the pattern or attempt to shift the balance are swiftly labeled as troublemakers and pushed to the edge of belonging. Resources flow freely to those already full, while those who strive hardest must prove their worth again and again, often finding themselves blamed for any disturbance in the group's fragile sense of order. Admiration for the favored one blinds others to the damage they cause, and any call for accountability is drowned out by collective devotion. In this upside-down landscape, the rules shift for the sake of the one who least deserves exemption. Warnings sometimes arrive in subtle forms, unheeded, like the first faint chill before a storm breaks. Unlikely events begin to unfold. Planned betrayals fall apart, alliances wither, and the ground shifts beneath those who plotted in secret. Changes ripple through the web of connection. Those sent to disrupt find themselves blocked, and plans made in secret unravel in the light. The more fiercely anyone tries to press their advantage, the more resistance they encounter, as if an invisible hand has turned the board. Some are shaken by strange setbacks, losses, or even calamities that seem to fall from a clear sky. The group's most intuitive members sense a warning in these happenings, a message in the way events reverse, but pride or stubbornness drowns out the voice that says, "Enough." Still, the pattern grows clearer with each failed scheme. The energy they invest in holding on becomes the very force that unravels what they sought to control, and what once brought them power now delivers the very thing they most fear. Let me know if you want the next section fully reworked in this style. Every image, rhythm, and logic distinct and original, with the same core themes. Actions once thrown like stones into still water begin to send waves in unexpected directions, returning not to their intended shore but lapping at the feet of those who set them loose. Every secret intention, each negative wish or hidden hostility, becomes an unseen current, circling back and disrupting the lives of those considered untouchable. The more a person tries to direct hardship onto another, the more that current finds a new channel, shifting consequences away from their target and landing with force on those the instigator holds dearest. In the swirl of daily life, it becomes impossible not to see the ripple. As certain members begin to unravel, those who engineered the drama are forced to watch the results spill over into their own camp. There is a dawning recognition, sometimes gradual, sometimes abrupt, that no wall of privilege or preference can prevent the consequences of what has been set in motion. The energy released, meant to bind or wound, becomes an unexpected architect, remaking the very order the planners hoped to protect. The very struggles that were engineered to drive one soul to isolation now circle back, leaving those favored by the group struggling with confusion, instability, or loss. One who once could do no wrong finds themselves suddenly beset by failures, misunderstandings, or inexplicable troubles, all echoing the trials originally meant for another. Relationships falter, opportunities dissolve, and the safety net that was always there seems to unravel. As these changes unfold, the group's most devoted defenders are forced to reckon with a new truth. The hardships that were designed to marginalize someone else now press in on their own circle. Illness, anxiety, or family conflict blossom where there was once confidence and ease. All of the symptoms originally assigned to the outsider begin appearing, with uncanny precision, among those previously shielded. The design collapses under its own weight, and the group is left scrambling for solutions to problems they never imagined would be theirs. Denial gives way to urgency as those once so certain are compelled to confront what they have long denied. The inner circle, once dismissive of the possibility that their actions could have unseen consequences, now looks for explanations in places they previously ridiculed. Individuals who once laughed at the idea of hidden forces or deeper patterns become the very ones seeking out remedies, answers, or interventions from any source willing to listen. Leaders and advisors who were once mocked are now summoned to provide guidance, and the wisdom that was discounted is sought as a lifeline. Suddenly, old stories are retold with new meaning, and explanations once brushed aside become central to the group's desperate search for relief. The irony is sharp and inescapable. The voices previously silenced or ridiculed are now the only ones with keys to unlock the confusion. Evidence once denied is affirmed, and those who were shunned for speaking uncomfortable truths are seen in a new light. The systems that enforced silence crumble, as the need for healing overtakes the need for denial. The narrative is rewritten. What was once cause for mockery becomes the hope for restoration, and the wisdom that was set aside in pride is embraced with humility. This reversal does not come without pain, but it opens the door for transformation no one expected. Hidden burdens often go unspoken until circumstances force old secrets out into the daylight, unable to be ignored. When the weight of consequence becomes too great, even the most carefully concealed histories are revealed by voices long overlooked. People once thought to be outsiders suddenly become the keepers of understanding that no one else can offer. As turmoil surfaces, questions arise about choices made behind closed doors, about the rituals and agreements that shaped the group's destiny. Explanations once considered taboo or absurd are now demanded, and the chain of events that held everything together begins to break. In the process, what was once denied, patterns of harm, cycles of pain, secret compacts, are finally admitted. Only when the pain threatens what matters most do those responsible find themselves forced to acknowledge the role they played. The bonds of secrecy are shattered not for the sake of justice alone, but because the price of denial has grown too high. In the middle of upheaval, transformation begins not with grand gestures of love, but with desperate acts of self-preservation. The process of healing, however, is never one-sided. The ones who once inflicted wounds discover that redemption isn't possible without humility, that breaking old habits means facing the full story of their own actions. As the storm abates, both those who suffered and those who caused suffering find themselves changed by the experience. Deliverance takes many forms, Some are rescued from the shadows that haunted them, others from the patterns they used to justify harm. Witnesses emerge on all sides, bearing testimony that mirrors pain with pain, release with release. Those who once denied the truth are now compelled to seek the forgiveness of those they wronged, not out of newfound compassion, but from the realization that freedom for one is tied to the liberation of all. The transformation of the group depends on genuine acknowledgement, on each person laying down their old defenses and opening themselves to a future no longer dictated by the past. For lasting peace to take root, each must accept that restoration cannot erase what happened but can rewrite what happens next. Redefinition of relationship is essential when old patterns have been shattered. Choosing to move forward requires more than forgetting the past or pretending that wounds have healed by themselves. Caution becomes wisdom. Self-protection is allowed to stand side by side with hope. Trust is built slowly, on actions rather than apologies, as the group learns that genuine transformation doesn't come from simply wishing things were different. Sometimes the most meaningful acts are not declarations of loyalty but the quiet commitment to honor boundaries, to give time and space for trust to grow anew. As this process unfolds, those who were once blamed and excluded discover a strength they did not know they possessed, a strength to forgive without surrendering to old patterns, and to protect their own well-being while still holding out a hand for those ready to change. In this new reality, vengeance is replaced with a different kind of justice, one that heals, not harms. If you love a good mystery, subscribe for the untold truths of Scripture. Where old alliances depended on fear, the new order is shaped by unexpected bonds and shifting allegiances. The old scapegoat role dissolves as the lines between villain and victim fade, rewritten by shared truth and mutual recognition. New forms of honor and respect emerge, not as rewards handed out by the powerful, but as the natural consequence of lives changed from within. The lessons learned from loss and hardship become the foundation for something enduring, a new story in which no one is condemned to repeat the errors of the past. The pain once weaponized as blame now becomes the key that unlocks understanding, and the freedom to choose a different future. What once seemed to be a life sentence becomes the doorway to liberation for all. There comes a moment when old labels and accusations crumble, and the light that was hidden is finally seen for what it is, a quiet strength that refused to be bent, a voice that was never silenced, only forced into waiting. What once made someone a target now becomes the proof of resilience, and those who tried to hold them back find themselves face to face with the reality they denied. People who once looked the other way begin to recognize the true shape of the journey, and all those dismissive remarks are suddenly swallowed up by evidence no one can ignore. Skeptics are left speechless as what was called fantasy now unfolds in public for all to see. Reputation is restored not through argument, but by the sheer force of undeniable change. Doors that were sealed tight are swinging open, opportunities are no longer barricaded by invisible hands. The season of being misunderstood and pushed aside is over. Each hardship and act of exclusion has become a stepping stone for a future that cannot be sabotaged by old fears. Every obstacle, every attempt to box in potential or cast doubt on integrity, becomes a distant memory as a new era begins. The strength built in solitude turns out to be the very foundation needed for something far greater than the approval of those who once opposed it. What was endured in silence now becomes a beacon for those searching for meaning in their own trials. Those who tried to keep the past alive through blame and restriction lose their grip, not because of confrontation, but because their old tactics have lost their power. Patterns of exclusion unravel, as those who watched and whispered are forced to admit the tide has turned. Stories of failure are replaced with stories of survival and victory, narratives written by lived experience, not inherited opinion. As the tables turn, the consequences of old decisions begin to unfold in new ways. Those who were once defended at all costs, who escaped every consequence and were shielded from every storm, now face the results of choices made in secret. The scales are balancing not through revenge, but through the simple logic of cause and effect. In protecting one above all, the group discovers the fragility of their own security, as the very foundation of their favoritism gives way under pressure. Relief, healing, and growth become possible not just for the survivor, but for all who are willing to release the past. Lessons learned in the wilderness become guideposts for others, and the one who was once cast out becomes a signpost for liberation. The shift is both personal and collective. The curtain falls on the old drama, as those who once condemned must reconsider their own roles. Friends who believed rumors, professionals who trusted surface impressions, even relatives who sided with the loudest voice, all are faced with a truth that cannot be managed away. Reversal and restoration arrive, not as an act of force, but as a ripple that redefines every relationship, every history, every identity in the community. No longer held hostage by what was said or done, the one who broke the cycle now holds the key to freedom for others. The final chapter isn't about settling scores but setting new standard. The future opens up, not just as a personal victory, but as an invitation for others to find their own way out of old patterns. Where there was secrecy, there is now clarity. Where there was rivalry, there is now room for growth. This is not the story of defeat, but of release, a new beginning born from the refusal to let the past dictate the rest of the journey. And as the dust settles, what was once used as a weapon becomes the very shield that ensures no more harm is done. The lesson stands. Protection, redemption, and renewal can begin the moment someone dares to leave the script behind and claim a different destiny.